I wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of cap and trade in the United States. We have a very successful SO2 and nitrous oxide cap and trade program, and it was really implemented to take care of acid rain. There was a lot of acid rain problems in the eastern United States, with coal-fired power plants contributing sulfur dioxide to the atmosphere and then it turning into a real mild sulfuric acid or nitric acid, and then going off to Canada, and it polluted some of their lakes and killed some of their streams and hurt their forests. And this was a really high priority for the Canadians to get resolved. And finally, the U.S. took some action, and it was a cap and trade system that really created the solution to the problem, or as much of a solution as we have, which is pretty far along in solving the problem. The ability to have cap and trade really began when the Clean Air Act was amended in 1979. And there was something that was included called the bubble concept. The idea here is that a smokestack could be regulated using command control regulation, and every single smokestack that a factory, a plant, or a facility had would have to meet the particular standards that had been established for that particular pollutant. With the bubble concept was something different. It put a bubble over a facility or even a small region and said that let's just pretend there's a single vent and we'll measure the emissions from that vent. So within the bubble, a particular plant could exceed the limit if there was another plant that reduced emissions by more than that amount, so that the result was satisfying the overall standard out of that single vent from the bubble. So this allowed kind of trading between facilities, and in fact there was I think a clause in the amendments that allowed for payment for excess reductions that could then be used by another company to exceed a standard. The bubble concept was further developed in the 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act, and these included a provision that said that sulfur dioxide emissions would be cut in half, reduced by 50%, between 1990 and the year 2000. This was to address the concerns of Canadians about acid rain. In 1991, the Canadian-U.S. Air Quality Agreement was signed, and that added nitrous oxides to the mix in terms of reductions. The Clean Air Act amendments in 1990 also allowed trading of sulfur dioxide between the coal-fired utility plants in the eastern United States. That's where high sulfur coal is. So in 1990, the program was developed, and the first trades took place in 1995. The program's been an incredible success on a couple levels. I'll show you what's happened to sulfur dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere in just a second. But the overall cost of the program was much less than anticipated by $3 or $4 billion a year compared to predicted command and control costs. Now, trading can explain part of these savings. Trading allows companies to be flexible. For instance, in a paper that I wrote with a friend, we found that some companies postponed making any emission reduction investments, preferring to buy excess allowances from other companies. And their thinking was that the technology to reduce emissions will get better and cheaper in time, and so by postponing the investment, they could actually buy more reductions for a set amount of money than they could today. The other reasons that there was savings was because there was a 5-year period between the time that the program was announced and trading took place. There was a lot of time for companies to hire consultants, engineers, and whatnot to find ways to reduce emissions. It also gave engineering companies time to design better products. So, in fact, emissions reductions were captured at a much lower cost than anticipated. The other way to reduce emissions in this particular situation is to switch from high sulfur coal to low sulfur coal. The coal in the western United States tend to have a lot less sulfur, and so it wasn't clear how much it was going to cost to purchase and transport that, but those costs were lower than anticipated. And so these three factors, trading and the flexibility that it provided, having time to find emissions reductions at a low cost, and then the presence of relatively cheap low sulfur coal combined to save companies a lot of money while meeting the standards imposed by the EPA. One of the problems with this particular version of cap and trade is that there was a oversupply of emission allowances. That is, companies cleaned up more than was necessary for demand for allowances, and they were able to bank the excess allowances. And they don't expire for a while, so there's kind of a glut of them, and that meant that companies that could build scrubber technology and whatnot had a much lower incentive to do so, because they knew that out there somewhere were all of these unused emission allowances, and when they came to market, it would undercut the demand for their new products, so it would crimp innovation. I think it's real important to understand why cap and trade can be effective, and it isn't always. What has to be the case is that companies have different costs of cleanup. The whole idea between cap and trade is that some set number of allowances are issued, and companies that can clean up cheaply clean up more, so companies that have expensive cleanup costs don't have to clean up as much. The excess from the cheap cleanup companies goes to the high cost companies, and the particular standard is satisfied in the least expensive way possible. If you don't have differences in cleanup costs, then this whole process doesn't work. If everybody's costs are the same, then trading doesn't make any sense, because I'm trading $1 for 4 quarters. There's no gain or profit to be made. So having a lot of different cleanup costs is mandatory. And that happened here because we have coal-fired plants of different ages, different technologies, and so on. So there's a wide variety of cleanup costs associated with them. Has pollution been reduced? I'm going to show you some maps, and the red dots are high concentrations of atmospheric sulfur dioxide, yellow less concentrated, and then the beige or non-colored means 0. And we'll see what happened here. The maps begin in, I think it's 1989 or 90, and then trading begins in 1995, and the maps go through 2007. So trading is about to begin right now. And there's one facility in Ohio that just cannot clean up. So you see that there was a big change in atmospheric sulfur dioxide over that period. And, we'd like to think that it had to do with trading. Hopefully it did. Well, thanks very much for watching this. There's another video that explains the emissions trading exercise that we're doing this week, and it's down a little lower in the lecture. Thanks. Bye-bye.